I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Peter, when you were younger, you did whatever you wanted to do, how you started the day. Strap on your belt, go where you wanted to go. But I tell you, when you grow older, someone will come and strap a belt around you, and they will take you where you don't want to go. Peter hears this on the third appearance of the resurrected Christ. What kind of resurrection message is this? What did it feel like to hear these words? When you were young, you were used to controlling the world, Peter. You know, when the going gets tough, cut off an ear or two. Do what you want. Carpe diem. But now, in this resurrection life with me, you will be taken to where you did not want to go. This life with me now requires utter surrender. So, today we find Peter, Tom, Nate, James, John, and some other disciples back in Galilee. Must have been a travel, because last week they were in Jerusalem in the locked places where they were. And today we have them back at the Sea of Galilee, home turf. And what drove Peter to say, hey, it's nighttime, let's go fishing? And the other disciples thought, well, that's a good idea. It's nighttime, let's go fishing with him. And they go out fishing around in the dark at night. And they caught nothing. Darkness and night in the Gospel of John are very symbolic. Darkness and night is the land of unbelief. Now, unbelief in the Gospel of John is not the cognitive assent and the intellectual acknowledgement of a series of theological propositions. In the Gospel of John, belief meant having a relationship with Jesus. That's what belief meant. So, they're still in the dark. They're still fishing around at night. What are they looking for in the dark? What are they grasping? Looking for answers? Maybe, or something to chase away the confusion of a life after Jesus has risen, but the world looks so much the same? Isn't it supposed to be different? What are they supposed to make of this? Go fishing in the dark. But daybreak comes. Daybreak. The sun rises over the horizon, and it's enlightenment. Time for enlightenment, the light to flood the world, and to be able to see and recognize. So Jesus finds them at the shore. In the Gospel of John, Jesus is always finding the disciples. So Jesus finds them on the shore, and he sees that they have been fishing around in the dark. And he says, "Catch anything?" And they, not getting the joke, said, "No, we haven't caught anything. We worked all night." And then he's like, "Well," continuing the joke, "why don't you throw your net on the other side of the boat? You know, because it's probably really different on the other side of the boat." And they, again, not getting the joke, throw their net over, and the abundance of fish, 153 huge fish. Whoa, that's a lot of fish. The net, wait, it's not breaking. It's not breaking. But the net should be breaking by now. It's too many fish. The beloved disciple thought, lots and lots of fish, net not breaking, lots and lots of fish, net. Peter, it's the Lord. It's the Lord. And they recognized him. They recognized him in the abundance. It's the third appearance to the disciples, right? They've seen him twice in his resurrected self. And they've seen him before many times. But each time, they have to recognize him. Even though they had seen him, they have to recognize him. This resurrected life is not so linear, is it? In the Gospel of John, seeing is actually often a deterrent to believing. It doesn't really work that way, right? Seeing doesn't necessarily mean believing. For instance, the first appearance to Mary Magdalene after the resurrection, Jesus and she are walking in the garden, and she does not recognize him. She says, "Are you the gardener? Because I'm looking for someone. Have you seen my Lord? Where'd you put his body?" And he says, "Mary." And she recognizes him. And then she might recall, "I seek out each of my sheep, and I will find them, and I will call them each by name." And she was recognized because Jesus found her and called her by name. The other recognition we heard last week when Tom put himself into the wound of Jesus, like the other disciples. And in the wound of Jesus, he recognized him, my Lord and my God. And today, we have a recognition of, whoa, there's a lot. There's a lot of fish. Wait, the nets aren't breaking. It is the Lord. So there's another level beyond seeing that the resurrected Christ is recognized. Seeing is not always believing. And that is, all of this illustrates the beatitude of the Gospel of John. We have beatitudes in the other Gospels, but in the Gospel of John, there is this beatitude. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. So, because there is another way of entering relationship with Jesus in the resurrection life. Initially, discipleship really meant kind of truly following in that walking with Jesus when he's teaching and preaching and listening. But there's a new form of discipleship after the resurrection. And this has to do with surrender. You know, when you were younger, you got up in the morning, you put on your own belt, you got to go wherever you wanted. But when you're older, you have to let someone else take you where you don't want to go. That is a harder level of discipleship. And they will need sustenance for that. And so Jesus, on the beach around a charcoal fire, has a last breakfast with them. So the charcoal fire, the last time we heard about the charcoal fire was with Peter. And Peter was at the charcoal fire in the dark, heating himself. And one of the servant girls said, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" And he said, "I am not his disciple." And now at this charcoal fire, Jesus says, I'm going to show you what discipleship looks like now. Feed my sheep. Go where you will not always want to go. Follow me now in this new shape of discipleship. And for sustenance in the Gospel of John, here at the shores of Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee, he offers them a last breakfast. Peter, go take some of that fish that you've caught and bring it over here. And Peter goes, and it is a lot of fish, and he was very curious, so he counted all of them. 1, 2, 3, 153. Any fishermen in here? Like, I gotta know how many fish I got. So he took some of the fish, and Jesus had the bread. And when was the last time you heard about bread and fish in the Gospel of John? The loaves and fishes. The multiplication, where? At the Sea of Galilee. Right here, again. Same symbols. And at the multiplication, Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, and distributed it. And the same he did with the fish. He took it, gave thanks, and distributed. Thanks. Eucharist. That's what the word is. So here they're given sustenance for the new discipleship to follow. This following will cost Peter his life. We hear that in the Gospel of John. This big catch of fish happens at the end of John's Gospel. But in Luke, which we've been reading all year, the big catch happens near the beginning at the so-called calling of the disciples. What would be the difference about having it at the beginning and having it at the end? Why would John place it here? I think it is because discipleship is an ever-changing thing. And there is a kind of growing up into discipleship that happens after the resurrection, that there is more reality to following than just walking behind. There is the total surrender. This is the next level of discipleship. So, in this Easter tide we are sharing, this pericope from the Gospel of John invites us to consider what discipleship looks like for us individually and corporately to follow Jesus now, knowing what he did for us on the cross, knowing his resurrection, and knowing that from this point out, it's going to be really different for those disciples, and we get it now because we weren't there physically. But Jesus says, I will ascend. And that means there will be a kind of discipleship where you cannot always see. You have to listen with your heart. Oh, abundance. Oh, things aren't breaking. Oh, I hear my name being called. So there'll be this kind of discerning of Christ in our midst. You know, when Mary first saw Jesus, she wanted to hold on to him, to keep him here, right? And remember, she went, Rabboni, and she went like this, right? And Jesus went, no, not yet. No, don't hold on to me, right? I have to ascend. And so we are getting into that discipleship with an ascended Christ. So what is our discipleship now? And remember, all of this following, to follow Jesus, is to go toward the one thing. For God so loved the world. And so for God so loved the world, let us walk into our discipleship together and discern how we can feed God's sheep, how we can tend the flock with Jesus. I have decided